Here we are. This is my new cabin.
I'm Jasper Smith.
Hello, I'm Jasper Smith. I'm one of a 4-man crew on this boat.
We're still trying to figure out how to make this film that we've been rattling on about for quite a long time.
From a personal perspective, I'd always wanted to be a filmmaker. I always wanted to be in the creative industries.
I'm Jasper. I'm filming. I'm a cameraman.
Oh, and this is without the wide angle on.
Yeah, I mean, it was chaos. It was total chaos trying to make this film.
Yeah, flashing on and off. That's it. On.
Off.
On.
And the idea is to take this boat, which is a 55-foot ketch, from here to Russia. We've got a crew coming out, 2 people from England to crew it with myself and the skipper.
So I was skipper or captain of our Deborah.
My name is Jeremy Lang, I'm 29 years old. I am skipper of the boat. I worked in the city for a financial company for 5 years. I quit 3 years ago to go and sail around the world on this boat.
One of the crew is a good friend of Jeremy's.
My name is Nigel Patterson.
My name's Nigel Patterson, and I was a member of the crew that sailed on the Ardevra of Roseland in 1994.
The qualifications in terms of sailing experience, not a great deal. I was doing a PhD in geology, and so I suppose that makes me a non-commissioned science officer on board this vessel.
Nigel brought a real lightness to the trip. You know, I found that he was very good-humoured and he made it a real laugh.
In fact, I do get paid a £5 for every time I point at an object of interest.
I'll point the object with the
And the other is a very good friend of mine, somebody I've known since I was 3, actually. So quite a long time.
I'm Chris Touros.
Hello, I'm Chris Touros. I'm one of the 4 crew on this boat.
Neither of them sailed before, so it's going to be quite tough teaching them to sail because the waters around here are quite rough and we're going straight from Petropavlovsk into the Bering Sea, which is renowned for being rough.
So, Chris, how do you feel?
There was no discipline about the filmmaking. It's chaotic and it's amateurish. It's whatever it's going to be. I think that's kind of interesting in itself, you know.
Hopeless. Rank amateurs. I mean, rank amateurs does an insult to an amateur filmmaker. We weren't filmmakers.
Oh, this is almost like a Steven Spielberg shot. That zoom was awful.
Oh, Walter, have you farted down here?
The camera,
That was a shot about picking up Nigel, but some stupid chap has just f***ed it up.
We're going to pick up Nigel.
First I knew of this making a film was when I arrived at Hokkaido Airport. Standing off to the side was Jasper with a camera to his face. He's obviously very keen on making this film. Yeah, little DV things. It cost £800 and everybody seemed to be quite excited by it. And I actually kept a diary. This is it. Yeah. Very early on, it does actually mention the making of the film. It's in inverted commas, so it showed how seriously it was being taken. Wednesday, 1st of June, Ataru, Hokkaido. We did spot of filming, a sequence that is of the film, that everyone else is keen to make. Me? Well, I'm unsure it will make for riveting watching, but will make for interesting home movies if nothing else. I'm not absolutely certain about what people were expecting to get from it. I mean, particularly Jasper. I mean, I'm sure he had a grand plan, but maybe he doesn't. I don't know. God, I pity you.
That time, it was the cusp of such profound change everywhere.
Could you bring your face into the sun, please, Mr. Mendes?
That's what they're saying to you. Win the peace.
But it just sort of gained currency as a moment in time. Fall of communism.
Half a century has passed since Berlin was first divided.
You know, one knew that, you know, Russia was also going through this whole really unusual pivot point in its existence, if you like. And then suddenly, with the collapse of communism, collapse of communism wasn't just the collapse of a political system. The Communist Party did absolutely everything in Russia.
These leaders, by their actions, have caused the world to stand guard. Here in Russia, you see the reason why we are spending billions of dollars in defense production, why your family is paying the highest taxes in our history. And with the most deadly of all weapons available to the Russians, no peoples in the world can feel secure against this aggression.
With that perestroika, there was suddenly this opportunity to take a boat there.
It was going to somewhere that had been closed off. I think we might be in the first yacht ever to sail there.
I mean, I think officially Kamchatka had basically been closed. People had been used to a way of life for decades.
You can't do this to me! I'll strike! The state forbids strikes.
I'll take this case to the Supreme Court.
The state is the Supreme Court. Our decision is as follows.
And then suddenly they had nothing, had no money or anything. And they had to start every day from scratch.
It was this place that was unknown, a place that just knew nothing about, and people didn't know anything about. It was just like, wow.
And so the tapes were lost for ages and ages, and I was like, where are they? And it was only a couple of years ago we started thinking, oh, maybe, if you plug this thing together, what would it look like?
What's great about having someone like Jasper as part of something like this is he'll push you to do things which you won't ordinarily have done.
Probably in the back of our minds, we always knew it was just going to stay in the cupboard for 20 years. But I think had we tried to produce this film 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been that fascinating.
He was taking it very seriously. He always had these plans and was always just sort of fired up. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I was sort of like, my God, here's somebody that wants to go places.
Yeah, I'm a pretty determined character. And I like, if I start something, I like to see it conclude. It's, it's been a journey.
From the very beginning, man has struggled ever onward in his conquest of time and space. For countless centuries, lofty mountains mutely challenged him, standing as stalwart barriers across his path. Upon the oceans that surrounded him, he launched his ships. At the mercy of wind and tide, they made slow headway across the waters.
All my life I've been in the spell of adventure and exploration and these wonderful endeavors. And I tend to prefer the ones that were sort of 30, 50 years ago because of the way they were filmed, and they're all a bit sepia and, they just look so extraordinary. So I find them, massively evocative.
An octopus is not a slimy horror, but a swift, colourful creature which moves with effortless ease.
I remember as a child, I was always attracted to adventure, and I've been hugely inspired by some of the old explorers. I remember devouring Jacques Cousteau movies and being fascinated and totally in love and enthralled by the ocean. I'd wanted to sail for forever when I was a kid, and there weren't many opportunities to do so. I didn't know anyone who had a boat. Somebody told me about the Cruising Association. I think it was the Royal Cruising Association, which at the time I thought was a sort of a gay, gay members club.
These homosexuals who have a slogan that betrays the evil of the breed.
But it turned out to be this sailing enthusiasts club. Towards the end of the evening, this guy got up. He was the owner of the boat. I hadn't met Jeremy, who was the skipper.
The run up to the sailing trip was I'd worked for 5 years as a fund manager in the city, and then this opportunity to go sailing came along, and I handed in my resignation to my boss at the time, and he thought I was completely mad. I was throwing away this fantastic career opportunity, but I was young and naive, as the cliche goes. And I'm going to do it anyway. Objectively, it was career suicide for me.
So the first I heard of it, Jasper phoned me up one day, as he was wont to do, and said, how do you fancy sailing the North Pacific in the summer?
I was working in Devon at the time, and I was made redundant from a job that I was kind of temping on. And then I got a call about 3 a.m. one morning. It's great. It's 3 a.m. I'm not delighted to hear from you, but there we go. The first question was, have you ever been sailing? And I'm thinking, well, this is a bizarre question to ask. How would you like to sail across the North Pacific? It was just out of the blue. And I thought, yeah, whatever. I was available because it was the dole or do this. This one sounds more interesting. There was going to be 4 of us on a 55-foot boat, 2 of which had done next to no sailing. But we were going to be sailing across some of the most inhospitable waters on the planet. You're thinking, doesn't seem like a clever plan, I have to say. I guess he just didn't want to stop the sailing trip. And that was the option. It was either take these Muppets and give it a crack, or he has to give it up.
I had just had my first child. It was a huge statement for me to make.
4 months before I left, I had a baby boy.
And so I was sort of full of the joy and the guilt of fatherhood.
It's really hard being away from him. I miss him so much. Every day I think about him. I'm missing all the sort of the small things. His little fingernails getting bigger and his eyes changing colour and his smile, him starting to crawl. It's such a huge bond between a father and his son. Yeah, I miss him badly.
It came at a time when I felt, I think insecure probably in myself and the skills I had. I was good at mechanics and engineering and maintenance and engines and things like that.
All right, you set? Whoa, good.
There's nothing more that he likes than just picking apart an engine.
The engineer hard at work.
An engineer, a mechanic, a designer.
Job's never done.
We're about to sink, or the boat's going down, and he's in there and he's ripping it all apart. Hand me the wrench, and he's that's the way he kind of lives. That's where he thrives. That space is where he lives well.
There's no perfect time to have a child, right? And there's no perfect time to go off on an adventure, or there's no perfect time to do anything in life. There's just a time. And I think it's in life all about taking the first step.
We knew it was an unusual trip. It was a very unusual time for Russia because it was opening up. The particular area of Russia that we're going to was very politically sensitive because there was a big military base there. It was one of the attractions of doing the trip.
So you're kind of aware that these tensions that have existed since the end of the Second World War are there.
He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing. That's what this film is all about. Duck and cover. There is a bright flash, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything you've ever seen. It could knock you down hard or throw you against a tree or a wall. It's a bomb. Duck and cover. If the atomic bomb explodes. Duck and cover.
What are you supposed to do when you see the flash?
When the Berlin Wall came down, you could feel that you were in that moment of history. And so I rang up a couple of my mates and we all got on a flight and we flew out there. And then we went and watched as people were tearing the wall down. And there was just this incredible environment there in Berlin.
You turned your dreams of a better life into the chisels of liberty.
It was a very similar feeling.
This is us just leaving Wakanai in northern Japan and heading off for Petropavlovsk in Kamchatka.
It was pretty evident that very few people had been to Kamchatka and very few people had actually done that circuit in a yacht.
When we were in Japan, you'd see these freighters that would come to Japan and they'd load up with second-hand fridges and cars, and they would just put them on the superstructure of the kind of freighters, the ships themselves. And there were literally cars hanging over the sides on top of the superstructure. Anywhere they could put a car would be sitting. But you're buying them. No. Taking the cars to Russia. And you realize that the crass capitalism of the West has hit very, very overtly the kind of previous communists. It just opened the floodgates. Suddenly they're just taking second-hand fridges, second-hand anything, just, consumer goods, cars, and they were just sort of just railroading them in there.
We would pass some of the ships in the shipping lanes, which would come far too close for my liking. You'd wake up and there'd just be this wall of steel coming sort of 100 meters from the boat, and they had no idea you were there. And what would a yacht be doing in the Kuril Sea?
It was quite a hard sail. And I just never slept. The boat was bouncing around a lot because we're sailing close to the wind. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 4 hours standby is the basic routine.
Rubbish. People should fly.
What?
It's your watch.
Is it?
Yeah. We've crossed the international date line.
Happy yesterday, Chris.
You confine people into a pretty small space. It's like Big Brother. except it's at 45 degrees, banging through the waves, and really, really uncomfortable, and everyone feels sick all the time.
Just beating and beating and beating.
Bang, bang, all the time, every day, because the waves are coming at you and the boat goes up and it slams down. So you're in the bunk, you're trying to get to sleep in your 4 hours, and you could hear the water sucking out of the drains, and then you know you're going to get slammed back into your bunk. Desperately trying to get sleep, but you can't really sleep, and you're overtired.
Sleep deprived.
That's the background. That's the background of just this perpetual cold, tired.
Nigel, tell us about your views of the sea, the mysterious lady.
She's cold, she's wet. I love you, miserable.
So there you go. It's official. Nigel has divorced the sea.
You know, you're very attuned to strange noises on the boat. And for the first 3 or 4 days, the anchor, which was strapped to the front of the boat, would work its way loose every 8 to 12 hours. So I'd then have to trudge forward in the freezing cold water, being bounced around, and I'd have to lash it back again. And then I'm lying in bed and I hear this fucking banging noise again. I'm going, it can't be the anchor. It doesn't sound like the anchor, but it's definitely an odd noise. So I go up on deck, I check the anchor's absolutely fine. I come back down and I can still hear this bloody banging. So I work my way forward and I get to the loos, the head, and I can hear this banging in the head. I go, Jesus, what's going on? And so I open the door and there's Chris, and he's trying to go for a piss because the boat is really bouncing around, and he's got his climbing helmet on. As he's trying to go for a piss, he's leaning against the side and his head kept on hitting the front of where the loo is. And that was the banging. And he got so pissed off with that, he put his climbing helmet on. So it was the sound of his climbing helmet. And of course, Chrissy just like, oh, sorry, dummy, goes back to bed. But that was Chris, he was like phlegmatic, just get on with it.
As with any kind of family dynamic, people take turns to lose their.
I can't remember if I'd just done the washing up or something, but Jeremy said some sort of simple comment. I have no idea what it was, but I went mental. If I'd had a hammer, I would have sunk the boat, I should think. And I don't think I spoke to Jeremy for another week after that. And I think it really shocked Jeremy, and it really shocked me, actually, because I hadn't ever lost it to that degree, and I don't think I ever have since then, actually.
Jasper and I would raid the chocolate from the fridge on our watch.
No, I only had 3. No, 4. No, 5. I don't have more than 3 a day, ended up.
I don't eat sweets because I can't bear sugar. I have a reaction.
Fat around the midriff.
Poor Jeremy, he had quite a hard time, I think, dealing with that at times.
I tried very hard to keep a diary every day. Wednesday, 8th of June, 1994. Jasper, Nigel and Chris, who are on board and acting as crew, all novices really, so it's pretty tiring.
I'm a novice sailor and long may it remain so.
Crew are pretty lax about conserving power.
Just wait. You'll be toasty in 10 minutes.
I have 5 layers on, including 2 thermals and a woolly hat. The tropics seem very far away. Nigel and Chris seem to be settling in fine, though they are very inexperienced. They're in need of constant supervision. Jasper rather lords it over them and is becoming a bit of a pain. I expect clashes ahead, especially over the Kamchatkan itinerary. Nigel made an excellent shepherd's pie for supper, even though they nearly incinerated the galley.
What are you doing, you bunny?
And constantly complained about the oven.
Because Polly and Winchie Robinson nonsense. I'm used to the highest tech kitchens possible.
Jeremy was incredibly patient and they worked it out. He was able to be the responsible guy with towering patience, I thought. I know I certainly have anti-authoritarian tendencies. Jasper, I know, certainly does.
Hierarchical leadership. There's several schools of thought on this. So you need a leader because a leader gives structure to a team. I think if you look 20 years ago, that would have been the dogma for everything. I think if you look now, most new businesses don't set up with a dictator at the top and they tell you what to do. It's far more consensus driven and purpose driven. So on this boat, I really struggled with the idea that Jeremy was the skipper, because Jeremy was pretty inexperienced as a leader.
I'll start with safety procedures actually. Two life rafts both live down there. There's a line which you lash on somewhere and then you chuck the thing overboard and you pull it and the whole thing inflates. Hopefully somebody brings a knife so we can cut the line so we don't go down when the boat goes down.
The sacrosanct rule is the skipper's the skipper. Listen to the skipper.
My role in that enterprise, if you like, is basically to bring everybody back home safe. If you're not really braced, you can do that and you'll lose your thumb. You allow your anxiety to really run, because you've got to try and think of as many things that can go wrong as possible and plan for them. Whilst at the same time, you've got to keep this facade of being calm and in control. There's this edge to what you do because you're in the middle of nowhere. If you mess it up, the consequences are really quite severe. If I happen to fall overboard, then you're stuffed. And so you have to learn to be responsible very fast.
For Jeremy, it must have been a really challenging journey for him. It's like a match in a huge expanse of ocean that is very, very prone to huge seas. I think it was really tough on him. And, and I'm not sure he felt he could rely on me. We got through it. We knew we could trust each other.
Oh, I can't trust him. I remember at the time what really upset me was I can't trust him to take responsibility.
A bit of tension, not much.
If you were there to make a film, you wouldn't have got a fraction of the experience because you're looking at it mediated by the glass in front of you, by the view through the viewfinder. And I think it's one or the other.
We were going to film this thing and we were going to, create this proper film out of it. And, we were going to try and release it. And,
you're doing little bits of filming and stuff, but it did feel nothing was covered. Nothing was covered in the way you would shoot things. You run into a sperm whale. I mean, that's high drama. Nothing filmed.
And the boat rises and then it stops. And it was a very odd sensation. It was like the boat had run into some massive pillow.
The boat jarred suddenly. And I think at the same time, we both realised it wasn't a wave.
And then see, about 30, 40 feet, this just black shape just punch up out of the sea. And then just lie flat.
As I looked out the hatch and saw a patch of dark brown in the water, you saw the thing passing the window. And I think pretty quickly you realised we'd struck a bloody whale.
I turned to Jesby and say, it's a sperm whale. And his face just went white.
After seeing the face of Jesby, our captain, suddenly made me realise that this wasn't a particularly good thing to happen.
And there was this weird, discoloured patch of water kind of around the boat. And then this great bloody sperm whale popped up in the middle.
I just banged my head. I was asleep downstairs and I just heard this almighty crash and then these screams. Whale! We've hit a whale!
Jasper and I were off watch. I remember the boat just stopped in its tracks, which was quite alarming. Not alarming enough, obviously, to get us out of bed. And then all I can remember is Nigel bursting in and saying,
rammed a sperm whale, 12-15.
It's bigger than the boat.
And Jasper and I were both like, oh, off. We just turned over and went to sleep. And then I was lying there thinking, did he just say we hit a sperm whale?
And no one was filming it. No one was tasked with, okay, always on the camera. So if anything happens, you're on it. You're covering it.
If sperm whales get upset, they can repeatedly ram a boat. That was the first thought that went through my mind when we saw that what we'd hit was a sperm whale. Was I was absolutely myself that this thing was going to basically turn around and try and ram us. And there were quite a lot of old accounts of sperm whales getting quite upset with all sorts of different boats.
I've heard a couple of stories at least of boats ramming sperm whales and them getting terribly cross and coming back and ramming and sinking them.
I would have had a major sense of humour failure, I think, if someone had joked about that, because I was genuinely worried that something nasty could happen. And we were in the middle of bloody nowhere, so it would have been a big deal.
I'd been reading Moby Dick.
And in true Moby Dick fashion, it drew all the birds with it. Which I didn't like the look of that. No. We just finished reading the thing.
And then we were all reading about sperm whales in the books, just saying, oh my God, they're the most aggressive. If any whale is going to attack your boat, flip your boat, it's going to be a sperm whale.
It was a version with the notes, and the notes, it was just explaining the background to the book, which is I think it was a vessel in 1830 or whatever it was that had been attacked by a pod of sperm whales. And it was a steel-plated thing, and they kept ramming it, and it buckled the plates, and it sank. So that was the background for Moby Dick.
In 1820, the American ship Essex rammed a large male basking at the surface in the South Pacific, and he turned and hit the ship several times until it sank.
Well, the first thing I thought was we've got to get out of here as quickly as possible. And so we whacked the engine on and just powered off as quickly as possible. And then the second thing I thought of doing was turn on some classical music, just with the hope that it might calm the beastie.
It was one of those things where you think, oh, we've hit a sperm whale in the middle of the Bering Sea. And was kind of terrifying, but awesome in the truest sense of the word. I mean, that was the thing. You just sort of see this thing and thinking, my God, that is enormous. You know, when people talk about whales being 40 feet long or whatever, you're thinking, that felt like 40 feet. And you think, my God, 40 foot is a behemoth. And I just remember just sitting there going, well, how long is it going to take before we know we're safe? And I remembered I had my camera, 400mm lens, and I was looking at this thing, and I thought, this could be the last picture I ever take. And I thought, if I don't take the picture, I'll live. And I can't tell you how lucid, how clear that made sense to me. There we are. That's all it takes. Possibly die, live. But I recall it vividly. And more than anything else, it was that stupid logic that made perfect sense at the time. If I take this picture, it could be the last picture I take. But if I was in the same situation, it would make sense just like that again. Subsequently, you realise that in actual fact, not having a good film meant that each of us experienced the trip properly. Had it been any other way, I think one of us would have just been bitter and resentful because they had to make this bloody film that would have just really, really compromised their experience of the actual trip itself.
You know, we were very naive and very young, but you know, it's beautiful to look back at.
I remember when we got up towards Petropavlovsk, and I remember the skies were quite low, and then gradually the cloud lifted, and we were sort of left with this kind of extraordinary view of Kamchatka Harbour, the backdrop of two stratocone volcanoes behind these shipyards.
Avacha, ominously just positioned just over the town, which had blown a few months before, but it could blow any time and wipe the town out.
And we were setting a course in towards the bay, and then we got hailed by a Russian gunboat. And then this clipped Russian-English conversation took place.
Was that?
And it just told us to stop dead in the water.
I have stopped engines. I am not making way. Am I to wait here, and for how long, please? Over.
So we were thinking, God, you know, is this an act of kind of piracy? How legitimate is this place? Is this a place where they kind of see a boat and they're thinking, these are going to be rich. We can just take that here, rob them. There was a sense of prospective lawlessness. There's a bit more kind of toing and froing on the radio, and they said,
"Where are you from, please tell me?"
We are British registered, and our last port of call was Wakanai in Hokkaido, Japan. Over.
And they said, "Okay, follow us." And so we followed them in. The reason that they led us in that way is because we were going in through an area where there were anti-submarine nets and mines, because this was an old nuclear submarine base, or still was a nuclear submarine base. We were sailing through a minefield, and somebody said, "No, that's not the way to go. Come out this way."
The organisation of getting access to Kamchatka was all handled by Jasper, bless him, because as you know, Jasper's a great fixer of things. Miraculously, some kind of permission apparently appeared. We really had no idea what was going to happen when we turned up. And you had that tremendous sense of this fluidity of the rules. In fact, the distinct impression I got when we got there was we weren't really supposed to be there. I'm not really sure that we had permission to be there, but because there was this sort of lack of understanding of what the rules really were, because they were shifting so much all the time, kind of once we were there, it was like it was too much trouble. And so we could kind of get away with it. When I think about it now, you know, the idea of going into a place like that where there basically weren't any rules, you know, it was a bit mad, really.
Can you tell the Port Authority that I have been in communication with Galina Volgina and I faxed her from Japan to tell her that I would be arriving in Petropavlovsk on the 11th of June, i.e. today, over.
Galina was our sponsor. You needed a sponsor to get into the Soviet Union, so she was the one that vouched for us. She was a fantastic can-do person and basically our linchpin of everything that happened in Kamchatka. She had a young baby that must have been about sort of like 9-10 months old.
At my home, I have a little baby.
Galina was a revelation. And she had this wonderful baby who would come everywhere with us, into the helicopter, up to the volcanoes. And she would get the pram out and push the pram at the top of the volcano across the ice. What's her name? Is it Maria? Maria.
And then 2 other children, girl and a boy. She said that her husband was a volcanologist. Kamchatka's got about 30 active volcanoes. It's probably the most volcanically active region on the planet.
You know, her husband was quite a well-known climber, climbed Everest, climbed some of the big mountains in the Himalayas.
Her husband was killed by a volcanic bomb. So, got too close, throws things out, and was actually clobbered by that. Almost, so matter of fact, yes, he was killed by a volcanic bomb. Wow.
We got a sense, I think, when we first got there that this, if you like, the kind of egalitarian ideal of communism was starting to fracture already in that power vacuum, because within a couple of hours of having arrived alongside in this rusty old port, and there was this quite flashily dressed guy with sunglasses with 2 kind of big, heavy guys next to him.
Talk with volcanologist.
Yeah, because I'm a geologist.
From
What's
happened?
He looked like a dodgy character. I'll just ask Galina. Do you know this man?
Pacific Network. Is very, is very famous. Yes, Pacific Network. Sergei Frolov is known person in Petropavlovsk.
Known person?
Very known.
Known.
Yes,
known for what?
If you were going to dress up as a panto spiv, you couldn't do it better than this. So you see this guy in his camel coat, big moustache, and he's sort of saying, if you want to, I can look after your boat or whatever it was.
Step right up, folks. Here's the answer to your problem.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that actually you're a businessman.
Gangster, mafia.
It's very, maybe businessman.
Spiv. Like him. Spiv, Cockney, same thing.
Is he hustling for business? Is he a chancellor? Is he something far more sinister? Is that a threat or is that kind of an offer?
So that was our first kind of brush, if you like, with this idea that, there's some elevated people here. And there was a lot of that, kind of like, no one really knows what's going on here. Particularly when they come from a period of years and years and years where everything was done for them and they had this tremendous degree of predictability. Yeah, it was lawless back then. And as I say, you got that sense it was already pretty corrupt. Wednesday, 15th of June, 1994. Statue of Lenin was very fine. And all the side roads and dirt tracks, dirty kids in broken clothes playing in the streets. Echoes of the 70s and council estates and gypsy camps, dusty and crumbling. I had the impression of ordinary people gritting their teeth and struggling through. Big Russian ladies with arms bulging from flowery frocks, faces plastered with gory Max Factor makeup and Les Dawson hairdos. With the delightfully solid, fierce-looking dinner ladies in white nylon uniforms under ridiculous nylon hairnets. It was fabulous.
It was decommissioned. the last Cold War frontier town, really, before Alaska. I felt for them. I mean, it was an abandoned town, really. They were incredibly hospitable. They would share whatever they had, and they had nothing, really, virtually nothing at all.
There was obviously a huge shortage of resources and a huge shortage of money. It didn't look like poverty. It didn't feel like poverty. I don't think it was. It's just that there was really nothing much to sell. So if you went to the department store, we went to one department store, and it was this huge long glass case, but there were like 2 plastic plugs in it, and that was all there was to sell. And all the shop assistants were beautifully dressed, and everyone was immaculate. It was almost like this charade. There was no, why is everyone here trying to sell this stuff? There's literally 2 plugs to sell. And I think it was just the confusion that community must have felt as a whole political system was disintegrating around them. All the supply chains had been cut off. There was zero comprehension of what was going to come next. And so there was a huge anxiety and fear, I think. And I think what happens in those situations, we put our best show on, we put our best clothes on, put our lipstick on, and do our nails, and put a tie on and make ourselves feel like we belong to something.
We must fight to regain our freedom, or everything is lost. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
That signing of the nuclear accord, there was a sense, I think, that Russia had been denuded with the collapse of communism, that Russia had gone from being the superpower to being a nothing power. My sense was that the Russians saw the nuclear disarmament treaties and all these things as essentially them being bullied into a position of weakness.
We know what to do about it. And now, gentlemen, no violence, please.
Working together to produce an ever greater abundance of material and spiritual values for all. That is the secret of American prosperity.
That is one of the reasons why someone like Putin was able to sort of step in. And I think very much his agenda since then has been, the reasserting of Russia as a great nation. For many of us, if you like, with the Western perspective, we would have seen a great moment of world peace and so on. I think the Russians would have seen it quite differently.
Everyone was having to get by. This infrastructure has gone, this has shifted, this has changed, and it's still finding its feet in terms of having to make a living. Did it feel poor? Did it feel poverty? I think probably it didn't feel any worse than some places in Northern Britain in the 80s. If you went to any place, industrial town that kind of had high unemployment, it would probably feel similar, not dissimilar, rather. It's stuff that could be construed as nuanced are things that we're far likely to miss. And I think that's probably the case with, well-dressed women standing alone by the side of the road, and you're not clicking that and going, okay, they are sex workers. If it was prostitution, which I'm assuming it was more open and overt, and people were turning far more of a blind eye. The idea that there are professional working women. And they were quite open as opposed to other cities where it tends to be in less salubrious places. This was actually in the sort of near the main sort of square and stuff.
Is it possible to do any trekking from here?
Yes. We can, by helicopter, fly around Gorely volcano.
We wanted to hire a helicopter.
And Galina had worked really hard to create this community of people for us and said, would you like to go off to climb one of these volcanoes, Vacha volcano? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, to do that, we need to hire a helicopter. And when we've done that, we need to hire these dogs and sledges to get us, far enough in.
It was going to cost $600 an hour. And I'm thinking, $600 an hour a lot? I don't know. $600. It was a lot to us. It was a lot to me. I was on the dole, for God's sake.
The helicopter price, is that $800 for 1 hour?
750.
Ex-military Mill 6, can carry 20 odd people. And we're hiring it for $600 for an hour. And you're thinking, my God, this is a massive machine.
The helicopter pilot was quite a dude, this guy Sasha, with aviators, big tash, cigar.
Russian fanera.
What are you looking for?
He buried some beer here in 1983.
Whoa!
No, I can't remember anyone who wasn't called Sasha.
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 They're all called Sasha. All of them. I think there's about 5 different Sashas.
Here we have the local Kamchatkan fire brigade. They actually parachute into areas to fight the fires. And here is the fire tender and pilot.
Jasper and Chris. Jasper in particular saw himself as kind of somebody who was sort of like, I'm a mountaineer, I can do X, Y, and Z. And I was thinking, okay, I'll follow your lead then.
2 years before that, I'd been out in Chile in South America. I had a similar phone call where he said, I think we should climb Aconcagua.
The people ahead of us all died, which wasn't great. So it sort of set the tone in quite a negative way.
Jasper was aiming to push the agenda, to be a bit more daring. And I think Jasper had probably done a bit more adventuring. So he likes to live closer to the edge, getting out of a fix. I think he's very good at that, Jasper.
I think there's a strong analogy between how we see adventure and how we see life in general. You know, I think adventure is a great metaphor for some of the challenges that we have in life and how we overcome them. The beauty of adventure is it's very, very simple, you know, in that there's a mountain there, I want to climb it. I can see the route and I can see there's some challenges and there's a glacier there and I need ropes and crampons, etc., but I can sort of navigate my way up. Life doesn't have that, in that you're sort of blindfolded to what's even 30 seconds in front of you. Adventure fills you with awe and adrenaline and senses of achievement and well-being. And life well run does exactly the same.
Jasper obviously wanted to climb volcano. I wanted to be able to go and see a volcano. We set out in a big old military truck.
16th of June 1994. Drove to Avaxia. It took about 3 hours. Back of the truck had no seats, 6 portholes, and lots of backpack skis, etc. And 1 sled dog in training. The dog got car sick and vomited on Jonathan's rucksack. At the camp, we met an incredibly fit-looking couple who had come 3rd and 4th in the Great Kamchatkan Dog Sled Race, the largest in the world, and that is in the Guinness Book of Records.
It had terrible access, Petropavlovsk. I mean, there were probably 1 road in there, most of the time covered in ice, 20-foot sheets of ice.
And we trekked there, and even that was miserable. It was just so hard. But we were walking sort of up this valley, and it must have been, I don't know, it felt like 7-8 miles, and it was exhausting just to get to the hut. And we arrived there. So the next day we got up early, very early, sort of crack of dawn, and we started the ascent of the volcano. And so we got up to the sort of near the neck before it sort of went up properly steeply. And I think Jesby had had enough. Somebody who had spent sort of 3 years on a boat, his lower body strength, I think, was left wanting, and he had to bail. He just was dead.
The ascent of Avaxia, the last hour of the shoulder, was pure hell. If I could have been given the option, I would have folded. I wasn't, so I grimly trudged on. I arrived last, slipped off my backpack, collapsed on my back and giggled insanely for 2 minutes as the endomorphine ripped through me.
He skied off, I think. He'd carried sort of skis up, so he just had to sort of bail and go out. And I thought, I'm kind of envying you, but you can ski and I can't ski, so I can't get out of this because I was going to have to walk back there. Can't do that. So I'm going to have to keep going.
And that's what's so beautiful about mountain climbing is if you say, I'm going to climb this mountain, it takes a lot to back out of it. Once you commit to it and you can see the summit, you're like, I'm going to get there. And that's why so many people die in the high mountains, is because actually it's really bloody hard. If you've worked that hard, it's really hard to turn around. Coming down mountains is far more challenging than going up. Most accidents happen, coming down.
It felt like it was at 45 degrees. It's like you were on a tray of gravel and just sliding back. And you look down and thinking, well, there's a slope that's going to be about 300 meters. And if I sort of slip, I'm just going to sort of just slide down that slope 300 meters. You felt like this ridiculous cartoon character scrabbling to stay still. Why am I doing this? This is rubbish. Who the hell does this for fun? Eventually got to the top. And at the top, it was just like blasting. So far am I come to, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? But it was amazing. It was stunning. There was just that sense of just, this is something that I'd never expected ever to encounter. Climbing a volcano and then standing in an active vent, as it were. Remarkable. We got back down to the hut, had some soup, and then we had to have that 7-mile walk. And I remember thinking, I can't do this, I'm just dead on my feet. But one of the sashes was just sort of walking on. I thought, the only way I'm going to make it back to that truck is if I just walk at his pace. And he was just going at a ridiculous pace. And I thought, if I drop off him, I'm dead. I just don't know where the hell you are. You're just watching these feet and making sure that they don't fall out of your line of vision. So I managed to get back there. And I don't think I've ever been so tired in my life. I honestly don't think I've ever felt so utterly awful. People sort of say it was well worth it at the time. I'm thinking, at the time, I didn't think that. My God, I could see no reason why anyone wants to do that kind of rubbish. If I could just recall it like that every time, this is what you felt like. No one would do that rubbish. It's pointless. It probably took a year for me to look back and go, that was brilliant. But that's only because, you forget the pain. Remembering it now, it's just spoiled that experience. It's going to take another year for me to appreciate it again.
We met some fantastic people there. The Russians were just amazing, so generous and open-hearted and just wonderful people.
It's great. This is meant to be a party for us, and we're going in the tradesman next entrance.
Hello! We are waiting for you.
I would like to make it known as a landlord. I am not a sailor, I'm a geologist. I like my feet on the ground. All my family were at sea. My grandfather, his grandfather, but I have never been to sea until now. Only the chance to come to Kamchatka. That was the only thing that got me on a boat. For me, the sea is just cold and wet. Where I come from, in the north of England, we pride ourselves on being friendly, but that is nothing compared to the friendship that has been shown to us by everybody we've met. And so I would like to propose a toast from England to Kamchatka.
Goodbye. Good luck for you.
When we were leaving Kamchatka, we had instructions of how to leave, and it had to be done in a very, very particular way because we were leaving a nuclear submarine base. And there were a number of marker buoys which we had to keep the right side of, and there's certain protocols we had to follow. I had to delegate doing the boat to Jasper.
Can you explain to our viewers what's happened?
Well, the exciting thing that's happened is that as we were leaving the harbour and leaving Petropavlovsk and leaving Russia, the radio came on and they have asked us to turn around and go back. Knows why?
I think it's because they miss us already.
quite possibly.
They're such friendly people, always singing and dancing, and they want us to join in one last knees up.
We anchored again, and then after about 5 minutes of radioing Petropavlos 49, who were the people that told us to turn back, they finally answered and said that we could leave again. But this time we were not to go the wrong side of Cardinal Buoy number 1, which regrettably first mate lost his concentration and did go the wrong side of.
First mate being?
Jasper. That's the boy.
Let's see if we can see it. I believe we can.
Jasper went the wrong side of a buoy. Now, it's a really kind of trivial thing, and most of the time it wouldn't matter, but in this context it was really important. And he just sort of, in his Jasper, went, oh, who cares, you know? I got a major rollicking for basically having gone the wrong side of a buoy because there was anti-submarine nets everywhere. It took me a bit of time to overcome that. You know, when I look back on that period, it was definitely one of those experiences that is really enjoyable in hindsight because, you know, when I read through my diaries and I begin to relive it again, you know, you spend a very high proportion of your time basically being anxious. But what it did for me was it made me grow up. It was like a sort of university course in taking responsibility. There's this sort of cliche with the sea of you send a boy away to sea and he comes back a man. And that really was true for me.
We made it. We've travelled thousands of miles across some notorious stretches of water, and we've seen some incredible things. And I'm proud of a lot of you. I'm particularly proud, especially noteworthy, are Nigel and Chris, who basically had done no sailing before we set off and suffered seriously on the long passages. And I think it's a great thing that we've got them all, both here in one piece. And Jasper's been brilliant. I wouldn't be here without him. And I think it's fabulous, the things that we've done. And here we are all at the end, and we're still speaking to each other.
Amazing.
Kamchatka was out of this world, the volcanoes, the skiing, and the people. For me, the crossing the Bering Sea was a big thing, to have done that.
There you go.
I've got to pack it. I've got to pack you.
I look at this trip as a sort of a metaphor for everything that was right in life in many ways, in that it was a very pure, very simple trip at a time in life when life was relatively straightforward and was simple. You know, if I fast forward to today with all the, you know, pressures that go with being older, you know, I do look at it as a shining torch of where I would love to be.
I was thinking this morning on the way here, I'm exactly twice the age I was when I was on the boat. Almost to the day. 20 years can go just like that.
But I think it's fascinating looking at how life's passed and what's happened to us all.
So when I came back, I found it so easy to then get back and build a career. It was it was without a doubt the best decision I've made in my life, and it definitely changed me as a person. So it does show you that you can take risks.
Risk is a great thing. You know, risk is something that we should all feel every day if we can. You know, if you don't put yourself at risk, you don't go anywhere, right? Because it's the DNA of life. It's the thing that gives us, you know, energy, motivation. You know, what's over that hill? You know, getting over that hill is going to have risk in it, but you still want to go and have a look. In my journey, it's been significant peaks and troughs of complete failure, great success, failure, success. That means that you live on these extremes of emotion.
I mean, he grew up in a garage. As I say, his dad had this garage in Battersea Church Road. He had guys fixing cars, and also he was importing mini-mokes from Australia and selling them. So he was the go-to man. Any mini-moke you saw in London came via Ron Smith. And then Ron had sort of slowly moved away from it, and Jasper had taken it over. So literally someone had wandered into the garage, this interesting character, another strange character, who was, I think the guy came in with some cars, some very fancy cars, an Aston Martin, a Ferrari, and Jasper fixed them up and did some body work, and the guy was happy. So he said, oh, well, I've got this project. Do you want to try and make a prototype? He had this idea of creating some satellite demonstration vehicles, so vans with extending masts. And it was just something you could go into the high street and show people They could get in and look at the technology and be wowed, and then buy a dish and stick it on the side of their house. Great idea. And we sort of cobbled together this van with it, and it was a piece of crap, but it worked. I think we built 30 in the end. And that was a sort of probably one of his first sort of larger scale entrepreneurial launches. I think one of the subsidiary companies that the money came through went into receivership. So there was a kind of big moment. I think he and I were in a van driving down Knightsbridge, thinking there was a lot of money around, and this receivership announcement came on the radio, and we were like, oh shit. In fact, what we did after that, Jasper being Jasper, he said, I know what we'll do. Let's have a big party. So we went to his dad's place, and he spent 10 grand on a party with, 3 grand on fireworks at least. Sit down dinner for 50 people, having just lost a fortune. And we had a damn good time. He's got a great attitude, which is very unattached to certain things. I mean, so he will, for example, risk quite a lot and just think, well, it doesn't really matter. I'll just do it again and, start again and do something else, which is going to be exciting. He's a true adventurer. He's a true explorer because he likes to just cut the interesting path through life. He likes to break the rules deliberately. He's learned to manage his fear, I guess, is one way of putting it. And he loves the excitement of something, a sense of something new. So, for example, in business, if it goes wrong, you start again.
It's difficult to know how much an experience back then informs your future to be. It will have had an effect. I don't think, there's no question in some subtle, small way. I don't think I was ever conscious of how inept the filmmaking was and actually thinking, oh, what we should have done is this. I think there were moments where I thought it would have been nice to have filmed that.
Jasper, you should be weeping. This is your film being wasted.
I still don't think I was thinking holistically about the sense of making a film. I still just thought it was just going to be a keepsake, memento. But I'm pretty certain, in some way, shape or form, it would have burrowed into my head and just sort of made me think, you've got to be able to tell a story visually. My background's science, and I kind of wondered, is there a way of melding the two, sort of my science background and filmmaking as an interest? I honestly had no idea. How the hell would you get into making a career in film? It was otherworldly. I started working in TV documentaries, factual documentaries. Eventually managed to wangle my way into the BBC Science and History department and work as a researcher for things like Horizon, their flagship science program at the time. And then sort of started working and directing and producing. I've spent over 20 years now filming. I'm not saying that I was charged with making the film, but had I been, it would have been excruciating to think of where I arrived and this was the genesis. This was the moment of inception of my career.
That Zoom was awful.
That would be awfully embarrassing if that were the case.
When I finished that sailing trip after 4 years, I had no savings, no career, literally kind of starting from scratch. And I had to get some money in through the door. And Jasper, bless him, managed to blag me some job as a consultant for something.
Yes, him. Like him. He's one of those elusive people. He's just sort of, enigmatic. Well, he'd bring me up, I'm in Norway. I've got this job in Norway. I'm like, well, what are you doing? He's just like, oh, well, I'm sort of, I'm international European salesman for something, some ridiculous. And it was like, oh, how did you get that? I don't know. He's like, oh, I'm just going to do this for a bit. The next minute he'd be living in Denmark or, he'd be creating some other thing. He was involved in creating games, preloaded games for TVs or... So there was always this kind of interesting traversing those worlds and finding the new technology, very much about, things which excited him. It's quite exciting to be around. And he manifests really interesting things.
We were in touch with Greenpeace, who say that there's quite a few ecological disasters in Kenya.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
I'm Elena from Greenpeace Russia, based in Moscow. Greenpeace have been working a lot since 90s. There were some threats that these territories faced. One of the threats were that Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, the city that is situated on Kamchatka, the capital, is a military city. There are so many just abandoned military sites and waste landfills. Many sites are quite unknown and secret. For example, Kozlelsky pesticide landfill. It has been there since 60s, 70s. We call it Soviet heritage. Studying the documents of this landfill, we found out that there were leakages since it has existed. There are more than 100 names of different pesticides there that are not used anymore in agriculture, that are just buried there. Old rocket fuel, which is potentially very, very dangerous. There are a lot of corruption on all levels.
Doing business in Russia now, from what I hear, is still very similar, really, to how it was from our experience. And from what I hear from my Russian friends, hasn't really changed. Kamchatka just being such an afterthought because it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. There is this tremendous murkiness about the rules and the rule of law, which forces most enterprise into this sort of grey world of semi-illicit business. They live within this infrastructure, which is sort of like a gangster economy, where because no one really knows what the rules are and the rules are changing all the time, you're always very susceptible to the sort of metaphorical tap on the shoulder and a fine. The idea of people behaving responsibly to things like the environment now, I'm pretty sure that will come second fiddle.
We have an economy that is based on oil and gas and on the resources, and we have big state-owned companies, and it's quite impossible to oppose anything to them.
I think even back then there was a lot of, gas and oil fields there. So I would guess that that's where a lot of the oligarch overdevelopment stuff has happened.
People in some villages, they don't have even gas in houses, and they are very poor there. They have just oil spills on their garden, but not some income from that oil because it all goes to the company. There are a lot of wild salmon. For example, on the river Bolshaya, there is a big contamination because of exploration of surface gold.
Going back to that helicopter flight, our piggybacking off the business venture on that helicopter flight was that we were delivering a bunch of guys to a fishing camp on the Sea of Oshkosh side of Kamchatka. And I can still vividly remember the guys who were the fishermen, 6 or 7 of them, they were all packing semi-automatic weapons. We arrived at the fishing camp. The fishing camp was an estuary, and they were basically fishing for salmon. But the fishing, they were shoveling the fish out and then ripping all the eggs out of them. And so even back then, there was obviously some pretty dodgy kind of activities going on.
There was a statement of some scientists. There are 5 places on the earth that are so rich in fish and biomaterials as this place. There are much less fish than before. Even the fish that they catch, it's much smaller than before. And it's also because of gold exploration. On the bottom of the ocean, there is a cemetery of old ships and of old military facilities. All the wastewater from the city actually goes to the ocean. Ministry of Natural Resources don't have enough money and enough people to properly control what companies are doing. If we don't change now, we will be a very backward country. We already are very much behind many of the countries, and our renewable energy is less than 1% in energy balance of this country. With all the potential that we have, we don't have any support for ocean pollution.
The innovation pace of change over the last sort of 30 years has just been, phenomenal. obviously with climate change happening and pollution issues around Kamchatka and around other areas of the world, it began to just feel quite topical. And it's really interesting that's the world then. And this is where we are now. And it's just really interesting as a historical document to see what that place was like and how people dressed and what was the state of the Northern Fleet after the end of communism when it was sort of sinking into the harbour. I think, environmentally, everyone is much more aware of what's going on in the world. I can imagine that the waters around Kamchatka are massively polluted. The ocean is our primary ecosystem, and without a healthy ocean, there literally is no life on Earth. And it's always amazed me that the ocean is so underloved and under-nurtured in that, we pollute it, we overfish it, we dump all our junk into it, and the ocean, unlike say a polar bear, doesn't have an expressive face that we can fall in love with. And so it's very hard for humans to have empathy with the ocean. In fact, we have a fear of the ocean because it's where we drown. And, we came from the ocean originally, but we don't really want to go back because it's wet and cold and all the rest of it. One of the most important and crucial things that I've been working on is a organization called 10% for the Ocean. So at the moment, ocean funding gets less than 1% of philanthropic and charitable funding on a global basis, yet it's our largest ecosystem. It generates every second breath that we take. It generates about a third of the food that we eat. It supports something like 60% of the population of the world. It accounts for all the absorption of excess heat that humanity's created. Yet every step that we've taken over the last 5 decades has just been about its destruction and its decimation. So 10% for the Ocean is really a bid to change that by creating a super fund for the ocean that enables individuals or corporations to support the ocean as a concept through hundreds of causes and projects and charities that are working to reinstate healthy oceans around the world. So I think it's a really simple way of an organisation or an individual understanding how a single pound into the top or a single dollar into the top can really create profound good across, that ocean ecosystem that so desperately needs our help. And so a lot of what I'm focused on now is trying to find solutions to that. And I think those solutions start with capital, conservation, protection. Those things are expensive. They require multiple years on projects that can transition corals into being more resistant to climate change, or transition the whole industry of fishing into an industry that actually wants to be sustainable. Rather than just thinking about the next catch. And really the only way of solving that is to solve the cash in at the top issue, because cash becomes the mechanism by which, in a sense, the rebellion can start. So I've been very focused on trying to put in place that mechanism.
He has developed his passion for the ocean. It isn't for me a burning desire to go back out into the expanse of the ocean to sail. For Jasper, I think he has to sail. He has to be a part of the ocean. I'm a soft sailor, day sailing in the Med. And I think Jasper's now, his intention now and purpose is more driven towards that, producing something which is going to be of some use, which will help save the oceans.
I'm a great optimist about, what comes next and how we mitigate climate change. At the core of that is a connection back to nature. The fact that we've all been locked up inside for the last year or so, I think there's this fountain waiting to come out of all of us. Just get me out, get me into somewhere where I can feel nature and I can see nature at its most profound. Everything to be optimistic about, but there's some significant changes that each of us will need to make.
The experience of exploring those areas, and he's been to some pretty remote areas, on sailing trips around the world. and really pulled together all of that knowledge into and focused his attention on doing something good, and is developing a boat project, creating a research vessel for sort of worthy causes.
You know, the trip to Kamchatka had such a profound impact on me that I've always wanted to go back to that time. You know, we climbed mountains, we went skiing, we met loads of people in the community, and we went somewhere really fascinating at a point in time when history was really changing. And now, you know, with Arksen, which is you know, my boat building business, that's all about that journey. You know, it's all about creating a tool to go back. That's all about a machine that's capable of fixing some of the ills that, you know, have happened in the ocean. So using, you know, really advanced technologies to make sure that it's non-polluting, or as non-polluting as possible. It's designed as a mini research ship rather than, you know, a yacht or something purely for pleasure. So it's designed far more along the lines of a workboat. It's designed for filmmaking. It's designed to enable drones to take off or submersibles to be launched from the side. It's designed with sensor platforms built into it so that it's connected through an active hull to the ocean at all points of time. So it can take salinity tests, pollution tests. It can take do automatic water sampling and things like that. You know, we've designed this envelope to be the ultimate sort of return to Kamchatka tool, if you like. And in building Arksen, it's really a love letter to that journey. It's interesting with the crew because I haven't, other than seeing Chris, I haven't seen Nigel for 25 years.
Well, one of the first programs I made as a director, Walking with Beasts,
rammed a sperm whale, 12-15. It's bigger than the boat.
I was lucky enough to win a primetime Emmy for that. Very fortunate, and thought, well, this is plain sailing. But it's always that, you're never satisfied. You make something and it's gone. It goes. It's a flash because you've no idea if things are going to work, if they're going to land. You hope they do, but nothing ever lands the way you really want it to land. I was hoping we'd win a Peace Prize. When this Nobel's Prize for Science, an Oscar, and then it might be satisfying. I mean, it sounds ridiculously big-headed, but I think it's just you invest so much. And more recently did a thing on Netflix, Alien Worlds, and it got well received. Again, you made this stuff and you just have to hope that it does well. And it gets, 19 million views or, whatever it is. And you think that's very nice. My career is successful insofar as I've really enjoyed making the stuff I've made. I've never had a day when I've dreaded going to work. I've never had a day when I thought, oh my God, I can't bear this. Success, insofar as you can measure success of a career, it's not being bored and really enjoying what I've done.
Success is complex. Success obviously doesn't bring you happiness, but success is also very hypnotic, and it's an addictive thing. Once you realize that you can build a business, you want to build another business. Or once you realize that you can paint a great picture, you want to paint another great picture. You're only as good as your last success. You look at a family, creating a successful family is an extraordinarily difficult thing to pull off. I think success for me now is just a calmness, I think.
I've ended up having a very successful career, really. I'm almost certain I wouldn't be as successful now without having done that trip. Having spent 4 years on Ardevra, the boat, it also has a high level of emotional resonance with me as well. It's an old Cornish word, means clearing in a wood by water. And it had such a big emotional impact for me. I ended up naming the business that I run now after Ardevra as well. So we now employ, I think, 40 people. We look after money for large pension funds and charities and foundations from all over the world. And now I'm getting to the stage in my life where I'm trying to pass some of my knowledge on to younger people and give them some opportunity as well. And all of that, I would say, stems from sailing on Ardevra and starting again.
I've seen Jeremy maybe once or twice in 25 years. And we're all just old geezers now. To his credit, he took the jump, and I think he spent 4 years sailing around the world. And I bet he thinks about it every day.
Geez, I've never looked back, but boy, it made a big difference to me.
We've kind of probably tried to get together as a four at some stage, but I think I don't know why we didn't. I mean, I think about all of the guys on a regular basis. I think about that trip. It's always in my kind of close memories. I think I refer to it a lot because it was so awesome. It was so interesting. But yeah, I'm very fond of all of them. I think, I have massive respect for everybody. I'm an acupuncturist and a shiatsu practitioner. And we live in Southeast London. We have a practice at home and in town. I also teach Tai Chi and Qigong. We lead a really privileged, happy life. Yeah, I mean, the years have been good, been kind to me. One thing I think I'd like to say is to Jeremy, just profound gratitude, really, for him, for being so incredibly patient with all of us. Some very trying situations, and for guiding us safely across the Pacific. I mean, it was potentially the roughest sea in the world. Tall order with some pretty ropey crew. Yeah.
At that time, we had all of our life in front of us. We were young, we were, optimistic, hopeful about what might come next, all a bit unsure. There's this lovely thing when you film something and you capture this moment. We've all had really interesting lives. I look back at that moment in time, and it was a time when there was still innocence and there was still all of that joy and all of that hope to come. And I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to stop work in the way that I work now, and get back to adventure. Life has been, I've been really blessed, actually.
We're going around the Kenai Peninsula and into Prince William Sound. At the time, Chris was just at that phase when, perhaps much to his chagrin, he was starting to sort of develop a monk's tonsure. for want of a better word. So he was sort of losing it, just the crown.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. We were sailing along this little island on the horizon.
It was very fortuitously named.
Bald-headed Chris Island. And then he was sort of panning from my head.
Chris foreground, his namesake island, just offset, the perfect frame. It had to be done. I mean, it's not very often you come across something that's so descriptive and so apposite, is it?
I'm standing on uncharted land. It must have been revealed by the retreat of Columbia Glacier, which has happened in the last 5 years. And according to my chart, it doesn't exist. So we're going to claim it for the Queen, for the country, and then name it. I claim this island for England and for the Queen, and I name it Ardevra Island. To Jeremy and the crew of Ardevra, this bottle is only to be drunk, chilled to the requisite temperature by ice from a glacier or an iceberg. Photographic evidence to be supplied. Good luck, bon voyage, and keep in touch, Monty and Fiona. Well, Monty.
Here's to Monty.
Hip, hip, hip. Hurrah!
I think that's about right, sir.
Yeah, marvellous.
How's this for Monty? What's this?
Well, it's been done.
We'll be back in the spring.
There we are.